marriage. So our backgrounds, you know, growing up, what was it like, you know, in view of marriage, or what are some of the things we saw growing up?
Yeah. That's always a difficult question because I never want to make my mom or my dad seem like they're just these terrible people, because they were just products of what, you know, of their upbringing. I think my mom did the best as she could with what she had. Yeah. But yeah, it was very dysfunctional. You know, we grew up in a single parent home. Mom was a very, very hard worker. She provided for us. I can say that in my upbringing, we didn't lack. But dad, you know, he was in my life at a very, very, very young age. I remember the day that my mom kicked my dad out of the house. Now, they were never legally married. But my dad was, you know, he was on the streets. He was homeless a lot. And so I remember mom saying things like, you know, if I needed to be disciplined, well, I'm gonna find your dad, or I'm gonna call your dad. So to me, that's what dads did. I don't know what it was like to have a relationship with dad. Though when he was around, he was awesome. You know, he was an amazing cook. But I didn't get to experience that all the time. So yeah. What about you?
Oh, like I said earlier, growing up, there were, you know, mom was always at home. You know, my mom was always at home. She did the best she could with what she had, you know. My dad was in and out all the time. And when he was there, it wasn't good.
Right, yeah.
You know, he'd take money that we barely had, go use it. When he was home, he'd be drunk or high or something. Yeah. I remember an incident where some girl he was dating out in the street, not dating, but just with and doing, you know, whatever. She tried to break in the house at night while he was sleeping in the living room and we were upstairs. So, yeah, it was just super dysfunctional. And I think, you know, with that whole background, I think that affected us.
Yeah, of course.
You know? And yeah.
Well, it does one of two things. You either become like your parents, like your past, or what I did was actually the opposite. Like my sisters or even other people would say, you know, how did you, like, why are you so different? And obviously we know that it's God's grace. But I think at a very young age, I didn't want what I grew up in. I just didn't want that. I wanted my life to be different. So I was determined to quote unquote make good choices. So, you know, yeah, my path was a little bit different, where some people they become what they've grown up seeing. Yeah. So
how did our backgrounds affect us in our marriage?
Yeah, I actually,
you know, I don't think we put that in our thing, but I think that's important to talk about.
I think so, yeah. You know? So I actually talked a little bit about this today at our Bible study. So again, I was a single mom coming into the marriage, and so not only was I a single mom, but I was raised by a single mom. So guess who ran the house? A single mom. And not to mention I'm Latina. So, you know, you have those two dynamics. And so I think that my upbringing, and even me being a single mom, where I was in control of everything. I did a disciplinary, even though my son was so easy, but I did everything from you know, making all of the decisions to finances, you name it. And so coming in and first of all, not knowing I had to lay any of that down, it was like, you know, that was really hard. And then you were, you know, very, you know, the introvert, and you were just like watching me go crazy, I think. So that was hard.
Yeah, and the thing was, back then we didn't have those terms that we could coin to know what we were. Right. So like we
didn't know they were dysfunctions.
Yeah, like they
were normal.
Right, being an introvert. Like I didn't know that I had this issue of being around people and getting drained from it.
Right. And then I needed the opposite. I needed to be around a lot of people all the time.
So that caused a lot of tension.
Yeah, because you didn't want to hang out.
Because you were like, you know, why are you tripping? And I'm saying, why are you tripping? You know, and it's like, you know, why do you have to be around so many people? Why don't you want to be around? You know, so we didn't have So some of the wisdom, some of the things we've been exposed to, some of the definitions that we now can put on.
Right.
I would say it's helpful now, but man, I wish I knew what I knew now.
Oh my goodness. I think everybody can say that.
Right. And part of it is not knowing some of the conditions and issues that we, almost like the way we're built.
Right.
The way we're wired.
Yeah.
And because that would be helpful, having an awareness of how we're wired and how we're built.
Yeah.
So I think,
and it doesn't mean that you don't bring, even if you had good examples, or if you, knew what roles should be displaying what. Even with that, everybody brings, their sin, their selfish ways into a marriage.
Yeah.
So it was just even harder for us who didn't have the example biblically, or even just growing up. It was like double.
Yeah. So I think not having those definitions, those almost like a checklist of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then finding out, okay, why am I like this?
Right.
Or knowing that you're like this.
Right. You do what you do because this is, 1, how God created you, 2, because this was your upbringing, 3, because this is how you're wired.
Yeah.
And then looking at myself, that I think that was the hardest thing. Not necessarily understanding you, but seeing me and my own sins.
Right.
That was really hard.
Yeah, and I think that's good, because instead of saying why are you like this and what's wrong with you,
why am I like this?
Looking at you, looking at the other and saying, okay, you're wired this way.
Right.
That'll help you. Trust me. If you're single, that will be a dope exercise. If you're courting someone and getting ready to get into an engagement and marriage, a checklist of like things that you understand about each other, and trying to define those things. Because sometimes being an introvert isn't bad or sinful.
No, of course not. Right.
It's just a way that someone is wired, and being an extrovert.
Yeah. But I think too, marriage has a way of showing you about yourself, like about you that you didn't even know. So maybe making a list maybe the single person won't even have a list to create. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know about me and my sins until I got married. I thought I was A-okay. It's true. It is very true.
Yeah, I know that.
Whatever.
So that weighs a lot into like knowing how we're ready,
Yeah.
Because when you start defining things and discovering things and understanding things as best as you can, having that time, it helps you to filter out like where you're at and how you can move forward.
Yeah.
And our backgrounds have robbed us from that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's almost like we weren't taught that we can actually sit down and have a discussion on our differences, on finances.
I never saw that happen. I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah, we can even talk about finances,
without arguing.
Yeah. And the roles. So our backgrounds, a lot of times, a lot of people will hear that and what they think is, are you just using that as an excuse? You know what the Bible says, and what some people don't understand is that, our backgrounds are so ingrained in us. Yeah. That it's hard for us to step out a little bit and see the background at work.
Yeah.
In us and in our marriage. That's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough to do.
The only thing I can say that I remember that we had was somebody gave us like the 5 love languages. And I remember thinking, okay, so which one of these am I and which one of these are yours? But what I didn't understand was that sometimes, different stages of life might change those. I mean, you have some primary things that would communicate love, and then I didn't understand that just because my love language might be, let's say, acts of service, it didn't always necessarily mean I wanted you to communicate. So understanding, like, did I want that communicated, or is that the way that I communicate?
Yeah.
So that's probably the extent of what we had.
Yeah. That's crazy, and it's sad, and that happens a lot of times. And as an encouragement, you know, to those of you newly married, or those of you who've been married 20 years or 15, whatever the case is, and you see the ingrained background at work and the dysfunctions, you know, we have them, we've had them, and God is still working.
Right.
You know, we're not perfect. You know,
no way.
I think if some people saw some of our texts or some of our conversations throughout the years, they'd be like, man, what's up with these people?
Do they hate each other?
Yeah, you know, or what's going on there? That's part of the, you know, the ongoing work.
Yeah.
You know, the you know, I like an old Baptist preacher told me back in the day, man, it takes dirt to grow. It does. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, so true.
So
Yeah.
what would you say was our most difficult struggles in the very beginning of our marriage? What were those things?
Yeah. I would say for me, helping and knowing my role.
Okay.
You know, and being laying down my life as Christ laid down his life for the church. That didn't happen. You know, I like to think I was, but I came in, you know, with the old school background of, okay, this is just what we do.
Yeah.
You know, I work, I come home, you know, and at the time I was working third shift. So that was another thing. So coming home, being tired and not enough motivation to actually do extra for me was very, and you felt that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, and I think you were right in saying in the beginning that you were living like you were single. Yeah. So I think that, and I think that, and I know probably our next question would be to talk about what are the most difficult things that we think the newlyweds go through. And I think that that's one of them where, you know, people come into a marriage and they're still living like they're single. And that for me, it was living like I was a single mom. And so I was running the house and I was still trying to do that. I would say though, another thing that was really difficult, and I think we can keep it G, but for newlyweds is sexual intimacy. I know we've counseled a lot. I know I've talked to a lot of women too who were newlyweds, and whether they have expectations or there's fears or whatever the case might be, sometimes in the very first couple years of marriage, that becomes so difficult that it puts a wedge, you know, in the marriage. And I know that also would be a big deal.
And that's real. We can talk about that. I mean, there's no shame in that. You know, sexual intimacy is a core issue, and especially early on. You know, and that varies, you know, but I think there's challenges, whether new or, you know, years later. You know, there could be challenges there with that. The woman feeling used, the man feeling like, you know, rejected. Yeah. You know, and so those issues are at times, you know, challenges that married couples go through. You know.
For me, I remember, and I can say this just because we've said this. If we've married you guys out there, I've said this to you already. But for me, it was really difficult. One, because I was a single mom, so I had already been involved sexually and bringing a child into marriage. So what happened was, growing up, you heard, good girls don't do this. Right. And so, you know, I fell into sexual sin, and then trying to fix that, I had to look at what God created as bad rather than looking at what God created as good. And so going into marriage, good girls just, that, you know, this is an area that good girls just don't dabble in, whether you're married or not. It was hard to take that part off. So that was huge. The other time that was really difficult, I remember, is when we started having our babies. Because as a mom, you know, I am the nurturer, I'm feeding the baby. So I'm giving from every aspect of who I am, physically, mentally, emotionally.
Right.
And then I have to give to my husband,
right.
but I don't have anything left.
That's one of the things we counsel couples in when we talk about sexual intimacy and children. The woman is giving so much of herself.
Yeah, especially if she's nursing.
Right, she's nursing, and afterwards, and then, of course, the husband has, intimacy that he wants, and so that's actually for the husbands or those who are going to be husbands and want to be husbands to think about now. You know what I'm saying, is when a woman is in the midst of right after, when she has a child, she's giving of herself constantly. And being mindful of that, is there's some wisdom in that, because it's a lot. I've seen you like giving yourself, and you gave yourself 1,000%, and then I'm asking for 2,000%, and so stepping back a little bit, knowing where your wife is at that point in time, where she's giving of herself, she's nursing, she's cleaning, she's doing all these things, she's giving, and now you're asking again to give of herself. Not that she shouldn't, but being mindful of that.
And she may not even know that that's what's going on with her.
Right.
I remember I had no idea till I think baby number 3 came. But I think what is important during that time is that you're talking together and you're saying, look, this is how I feel. And she's going to be like, well, this is how I feel. I don't feel like I have any more to give. And so how do you just got to navigate through that together, praying together, loving each other, considering one another above yourselves, really laying down your lives for one another. That's going to be going to be huge.